the polls. And join me now to talk about whether Hillary made a mistake and where they are in the campaign, political consultant Mike Lux. Mike, first off, there's very few unscripted moments, but you were there in Chicago. Was Clinton caught off guard by the lobbying question, or did she know it was coming and she said, you know what, this might hurt me in the primary, but in the general it'll make a lot more sense?
Well, I don't think that the second thing was the case, because it doesn't help you in the general election to be perceived as an insider either. I think that whether she was caught off guard or not, I think she froze. And I have an enormous amount of respect and admiration for Hillary, and I actually don't think there's a lot of distinction between taking money from lobbyists and taking money from CEOs of companies. So I think the distinction that was drawn was a little bit phony. But having said that, I do think she froze, and I think it could hurt her. If I were her campaign, I'd be very worried about it, because what last year showed is that people are not voting for insiders, especially in Democratic primaries, but just in general. They want change, they want new direction, they want people who are not defending the status quo.
Now, I'll get into the numbers in a second here, but the polls show that Hillary picking up momentum and even widening the gap, and Obama and Edwards very little to lose to go after, as you said, the insider label. But when it comes out, they're taking donations not just from CEOs, but also people involved in the lobbying industry. Maybe the checks aren't coming directly. Do they have something to worry about here that, you know, they shouldn't be throwing stones from glass houses if it gets exposed, or there's very little downside to just rail against the incumbent?
Well, look, I write for a blog called OpenLeft.com, and what I wrote yesterday was that if I had been Hillary and that question had come up, I would have said, look, there's no difference between having a CEO raise $250,000 for you and having a lobbyist give or raise you money.
Now, Mike, in terms of the hearts and minds they're trying to win right now, there seemed to be almost universal agreement that people were confused where Obama was going. On one end, he was saying, listen, I never authorized the use of force here. I wouldn't have voted that way. That's not who I am. So he's left of Hillary on the war. But then all of a sudden he says, hey, I wouldn't hesitate to use force against Pakistan if, in fact, they had terrorists within their borders. She seemed to tack on that by saying, listen, I'm the adult here. I got the experience. I got the background. As they move into the straw poll and beyond, who do you think is better positioned to at least have a clear statement who they are foreign policy-wise?
Well, again, I think Hillary is on dangerous ground when she says I'm the adult and Obama is the outsider. Because if you look at the 2006 primaries, if you look at the Montana primary that Tester won, if you look at the Virginia primary that Webb won, if you look at congressional primaries all across the country in every region of the country, Democratic primary voters went with the anti-establishment candidates, not the establishment candidates. So I think it's fine to argue about where you are at on policy, and I think it's good to draw distinctions, but I think it's a mistake to be saying, hey, I'm the insider, I'm the adult, this guy's just an outsider. I don't think that's going to work in a Democratic primary.
And even beyond the presidential here, I know you're involved with a lot of progressive groups. That whole schism where the party's trying to figure out if they're going to embrace the progressives here or at the same time take them for granted come the elections next year, House and Senate included, obviously to the White House. Is that really the battleground right now for Democrats, where they got to figure out not to tick off the base, but on the same end to say, where can we be that will appeal come the general?
Well, I think that's right, and I don't think it's an either-or. I think that you can have a populist, progressive message that is broadly appealing to the base and at the same time broadly appealing to swing voters. You know, Lee Atwater, the famous Republican hitman back in the 1980s, said the swing vote in national presidential politics is a populist vote. And he was right then, and he's still right today. Swing voters in presidential elections in those swing states in places like Ohio and Wisconsin and Nevada, Pennsylvania, they tend to be populist voters. And so I think you can craft a message that appeals to both the base Democrats and the activists and to general election voters.
Mike, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you very much.
You bet. Happy to be here.
All right, everybody.